So the last question of the last session was not planned, but a great setup. So one of the things we'll be talking about here in this session is insurance and cybersecurity. But what we've been able to assemble here are some of the leading technical entrepreneurs here in Ann Arbor to give you their perspective both on what they see as security issues. Some of the companies are tech companies that have a play in security. Some of the companies are pure security companies. But they all bring a little bit of a different perspective, both of the problem and how they're trying to solve it, and the advantages and disadvantages and how they got here in Ann Arbor. And I think you'll find it very interesting. So we're very fortunate. Over on the left, we've got Mike Van Lent from SoarTech. We've got Naim Falandino from Deepfield. We've got John Oberheide from Duo. We've got Manish Career from, I guess it's FICO now, but it used to be Quadmetrics. And we have Scott Dawson from Arbor Networks. So first question is, I'd like you each to briefly introduce your company and what it does. So Mike, you want to start?
Sure. SOAR Technology, or SOARTech as we call it, is a artificial intelligence research and development company here in Ann Arbor and also in Orlando. We spun off from the Artificial Intelligence Lab at the University of Michigan back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think we're a tech company that has a play in cyber as opposed to a security company. We largely focus on artificial intelligence research for the Defense Department. We got our start in training and simulation. We've expanded into robotics, and now we're kind of in the final stages of looking at the applications of artificial intelligence to cybersecurity and cyberspace operations, largely from a DoD perspective.
Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Hi. So Deepfield is sort of early to mid-stage startup. We opened about 5 years ago, and we are a big data analytics company focusing on the networking space. Some of our early product offerings were really focused on visibility into the network, but we've now since released DDoS detection and control product, and really focused on trying to provide assurance for the network as a whole in terms of performance, security, and control.
Thanks. John?
Hey everybody, Manish and I were reminiscing about the first summit that we went to, and it's great to see the growth of the conference. I started Duo about 6 years ago, really to solve what we thought was the biggest problem in cybersecurity, which was protecting users from compromise. And we've grown substantially since. We have about 7,000 customers now across all segments of the market, all verticals, really providing what we're best known for is strong two-factor authentication. Hopefully we have some happy users and customers in the audience at the university and beyond. A lot of growth, a lot of challenges. Excited to talk about our evolution, both in Ann Arbor as well as the problems we're solving for our customer base.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Manish. I was the founder at Quadmetrics. So we were actually started at the University of Michigan. So the core IP that was part of the company was a part of the University of Michigan. It was developed via funding from the Department of Homeland Security, and that really formed the core of what we wanted to do. Thinking back, the real problem that we set out to tackle really was to bring a notion of measurement and metrics to the security problem space. And that evolved into scoring and analysis of risk scores and comparisons and an understanding of what different values mean at global scale. So that's our background, and as we were in the process of building the core products and making all of those algorithms and IP that were part of the University of Michigan into products, and real reusable scores, we had the opportunity to work with FICO, and that seemed like a logical next step for us. So,
Yep. Scott?
I'm Scott. I work for Arbor Networks. We are the security division of NetScout. We are also a University of Michigan technology spin-out, and what we do is provide network visibility and security for the world's largest enterprise and security provider service provider networks, and primarily detecting and preventing DDoS attacks on these networks and also enabling the operators to really understand what's going on there. And our goal is to be a force multiplier so that the teams that are working on these networks are able to leverage the data that we can collect for them and quickly understand and respond.
Thank you. I'd like to switch tack a little bit and tell us a little bit about your personal story and how you ended up here at Ann Arbor with the companies that you're with. Mike?
So I first came to Ann Arbor for grad school. So in '93, I guess, I finished my master's at the University of Tennessee and was fortunate enough to be accepted to the PhD program here. And I took the leisurely path to a PhD, so I finished in 2000, so that's a long time. And then after grad school, I moved out to Los Angeles and was at the University of Southern California for about 7 years, focusing on the kind of outreach between the military training world and the entertainment industry. So looking at the role of immersion, like from video games and movies in game and simulation-based training. And then in '98, my wife and I decided that raising a family in LA was not necessarily what we envisioned for ourselves. And we both had been in Ann Arbor for grad school and really loved Ann Arbor and the Midwest generally. And so we moved back to Ann Arbor. I was very fortunate that Sortech at the time was looking for a new chief scientist. And also very fortunate that all the people I had been in grad school with had been the group that had spun out and formed the company. So I knew the people, I knew the culture. So joined in '98 as chief scientist, and then it was no one's plan, but in '99 the leadership of the company decided to move me up to the CEO and president position. A thing I often say is in my first meeting as CEO, I asked what P&L stands for. It's profit and loss. That's a good thing to know. So it's been a great opportunity to learn a lot of the business side on the job while still being involved in the tech. And so I've been at Sortech now quite a while. The company's been growing quite a bit, which has been fun, but presented a lot of the good kinds of challenges. And I often say, yeah, these are the good kinds of problems, but they're still problems, and we still need to deal with them. And my wife is at the School of Information here in Michigan as well. So we've settled into a really, kind of great situation here.
Thanks. Naim?
So I started my career out about 12, 13 years ago working in the financial sector, doing sort of risk modeling for big institutions, mostly focused on anti-money laundering. Then I kind of decided that traveling all the time wasn't my bag. Took a job as our software architect at a sort of like B2B company in Detroit called Covisint. And at the time, I kind of figured out sort of like what I liked about technology, which was really working on large-scale data problems and specifically modeling problems. Machine learning wasn't really a word that was used at the time. And then I went and did my master's here at the School of Information, which was a fantastic program. I really got to blend a lot of the sort of HCI and applied areas of design that I really liked with the sort of interesting curriculum from EECS that I wanted. And while I was doing that, and for a short time afterwards, I was at Ford Motor Company in the systems analytics group doing predictive modeling on like sales forecasting and supply chain optimization. And then I had a sort of classmate of mine from grad school said, "Hey, you should talk to these guys who are starting Deep Field." And it was a really productive talk. I had a great discussion with them, and I always kind of wanted to try my hand at a startup. So it seemed like the right time to do that. And so I joined as basically the first hire, employee 3, I guess, or whatever, in sort of 2011, 2012, as chief scientist, and really have been focused ever since on trying to build out a sort of next generation network visibility and management tool.
Thanks. John?
So how I came to Ann Arbor in the first part of my story was put a big like redacted black thing over, since when the first times I came into town, it was mostly for nefarious activities, some what I would call innovative online marketing techniques for a business that I ran in high school. That long story that we can have over beers is actually how I met Doug Song, my co-founder and CEO of Duo. Ended up spending some time both at Arbor Networks and Merit Networks as I went through undergrad at the university, continued into the PhD program. And, during that time, had fun with lots of the systems here at the university, poked around the security that surrounded me, but really professionally was looking at the right sort of opportunity for Doug and I to start a company together. And it wasn't your typical startup where you're like, hey, we got this crazy idea, let's go do it. It was, hey, we want to build a company together, let's go find out what problems are worthy of being solved. And a very different kind of model of starting a company. But at the time, our mission statement was democratizing security. How can we take advanced security technology that was only affordable by the 1%, big enterprise, global financials, the experience we had at Arbor, and take it downstream to the underserved market, the folks that are below the security poverty line, can't even afford to protect themselves. Ironically, 6 years later now, we're not necessarily democratizing security, we're actually securing democracy. If you see the hacks of the election and the DNC, those are the customers that are coming to us for help now.
So I came to Ann Arbor about 15 plus years ago. My wife is a faculty member here, so I was sort of a +1 to Ann Arbor, but since coming here, I've never looked back. It never ceases to amaze me that on Saturday or Sunday, given that you're in the right part of town, you can go out and there's not a car on the street, and you can actually not waste time on the road sitting in traffic. In terms of my professional career, when I came into town, I was at Merit Network, which is a part of the University of Michigan.
I think that was like my first real job. Manish was my first boss.
Kind of. My main responsibility there was just keeping him out of trouble. Good times. So I was at Merit for close to 10 years, and in the research team, looking at all kinds of problems ranging from security to traffic analysis, because at Merit we do a significant amount of traffic analysis. And then as part of that, we started to grow into data collections and internet scans, internet-wide scans, and understanding the properties of malicious activities at a global scale. And that was a true turning point when you started to realize that just by looking at organizations globally, just from sitting here in Ann Arbor, you could infer what kinds of activities they were involved in. In fact, you could start to understand the similarities between what you were measuring and what security policies or practices might be in play at an organization. And that sort of dovetailed into a stint at the Department of Homeland Security. So I spent about two years there as a program manager. And one of the most interesting problems I came across there was that they are charged with trying to understand the cybersecurity posture of organizations, different sectors. However, as an organization, as a government organization, they have no access to traffic or logs or any assessment capabilities with those private organizations. And so it's an extremely challenging problem, and that's the two things sort of fit together at that point, and which is why we started out to form the company, which was the ability to do these kinds of network assessments, security posture assessments at scale, and to be able to do them completely from the outside. And of course, my wife is a co-founder in this, and she brings the machine learning background and the machine learning experience to train the models. But that's the long road that we've been on.
So I came to Ann Arbor for grad school, and actually undergrad and then grad school, and got a PhD from here. Also moved out to California, also worked in the financial industry for a little while. And when Farnham and Craig and Rob were starting up Arbor Networks, they convinced me to come back. And so, similar to Mike, California is a nice weather place to live, but I think this is a way more livable community, and we really enjoy it here. When I started at Arbor, I was a developer on the DDoS product, and I've worked on a lot of the products over the years. And over time, just sort of took on increasing responsibility until a couple of years ago, became the VP of engineering. So it's been a great ride, and I think we've been doing, really important work to secure and understand what's happening in these networks. And really proud to be here and be a part of that.
Thank you. So I'd like to go back into a bigger picture and give us your perspective on what you see as important threats to our cyber infrastructure, and specifically where you see your company and the kinds of things where you can address these threats.
As a Defense Department contractor, we do have quite a bit of information, and a number of our projects are at various levels of sensitivity. Everything from limited to only U.S. citizens can access it, all the way up to other kinds of things. So that brings a special set of challenges around managing those systems and those information. So we do all that stuff involved in that kind of work. And then a second thing that's kind of new to us is that as mostly kind of a research organization, we're sometimes described as a company with an academic hangover. We kind of have typically been very open with our technology. We don't cling to our intellectual property very closely. But over the past year or so, we've actually gotten involved in the automotive industry and the role of the kind of AI we do in self-driving cars, which is opening up a whole new set of kind of proprietary information and systems that now we do want to protect. And so that's kind of an interesting, both from a technical perspective, how do we protect that info, but even more interesting from a culture perspective, right? How do you get people who kind of believe in the open sharing of information and publishing their work to now sort of see the benefit of protecting it and not putting it out there. And this is kind of an ongoing internal conversation in the company and an education process and developing new processes and things like that. And then we obviously have our personnel information and all that we have to secure. So we do have rare but real instances of foreign nations trying to conduct espionage on the company, which is interesting to think about and talk about. And so we do have to be on guard for that a little bit. Thankfully, none of them have been very serious, and they've all been recognized as far as we know, recognized very early in the process. So education, implementing the government regulations. There is a new set of government regulations coming out, the NIST 800-171 regulations, which is a whole new set of information security regulations for government contractors that we're trying to wrap our head around what that means for us, which is going to be a challenge. And then we are now doing some things like we're going to create a separate facility here in Ann Arbor for the more commercially oriented work, as part of kind of separating the groups that are doing kind of our normal DoD research and our groups that are doing this more commercially oriented research. So part of that culture change and that process change is going to be separating into different security, different facilities that have different sort of security postures.
Okay. Naim?
So from my perspective, one of the biggest threats to many of our customers, which are big telecom, mobile carriers, ISPs, transit carriers, game companies, those sorts of things, data center operators, is oftentimes lack of visibility. One of the things that sort of surprised me when I first joined Deep Field, because I hadn't really been part of the networking industry before that, was I thought that they sort of had really good picture of what was happening in the networks. And sort of there was like two things going there. Well, one was that at one point they did, but then the nature of how internet services had to be delivered was starting to change, right? When you're sort of driving the amount of traffic that like Facebook or Netflix or like Blizzard or some of these other companies would drive, you can't sort of deliver them in sort of the old model of the early 2000s. You need content delivery networks. You need to light up your own backhaul. You need to locate very close to the edge of the network to be close to the subscriber. And so when you have a very distributed service delivery model like that, just understanding what all this Akamai traffic is, Akamai big CDN, what actual service that is, it can be very challenging. So, a lot of times when we go to a customer and we, start up a trial, one of the first things they'll tell us is like, you're wrong. And we have to defend the data because they don't actually know what's happening. Just one anecdote is we were doing a trial with a data center operator, and we turned on the software and got it all stood up. And one of the things that popped up right away was we saw a lot of Bitcoin traffic on the network, right? There's Bitcoin miners on the network. And they're like, your software's broke, right? And we're like, actually, no. So we dive into it and we show them exactly what servers and what data center and what racks are running this. And it turns out they had a bad actor, sysadmin, who had gone in and installed a bunch of Bitcoin mining software on all their racks and was privately siphoning off all these Bitcoins using the company's power. It was eye-opening to them. We did sell that, make that sale. So, that's kind of one of the big things. Like, DDoS is obviously a big deal. It's back in fashion. But we are also looking at all these sorts of like diverse threats to operational, stance, right? Security is fundamentally about, can you deliver what you're trying to deliver to your customers? And whether it's DDoS or you've got bad hardware in the network or you've got misconfigurations or you've got crazy sysadmins eating up all your CPU cycles, that's the sort of stuff that we want to find.
Thanks.
So we're supposed to disagree on the panel, so I'll say, no. There's a lot of, as you said, diverse problems to solve in security, but I think, at its heart, the fact that all of you guys can go out in the lobby and run a phishing simulation, or from your laptop, you can send an email and break into any organization in the world. That's the biggest problem in security, hands down, period. You can go online, you can find the exact email that was sent to Colin Powell to phish his inbox and gain access to all of his documents. The problems that we're seeing is that organizations don't have that focus on the fundamental problems of security. They're worried about the esoteric problems. They're worried about like nation states. They're like, yeah, China's attacking me, so I'm going to go buy, a $200K FireEye appliance and then hire staff to operationalize that and to run down alerts that are in that interface every day, and they end up creating more work for themselves. So kind of the biggest threat is not focusing on the simple solutions to the most important problems that every organization faces. And that's what we try to fill in as a company. We try to address the fundamental security problems that we've been struggling with as an industry for a couple decades, but do it in a way that every organization can deploy and can effectively and easily manage.
Should I disagree?
Yes.
I agree.
Oh.
No. I think John is absolutely right in the fact that it is important to understand that security is very, very much a day-to-day housekeeping maintenance task. It's not about the flashy once a year event that occurs, and that's essentially what our core models that we've been working on are trying to detect. It's and we've shown this with data is if you as an organization are doing a very good job on basic housekeeping chores, such as making sure your firewalls are configured right, making sure printers are locked down, making sure your machines are updated. Boring daily chores, those are the greatest predictors of whether or not an organization will have a data breach or not. The better you are at doing those daily chores, the lower your probability of a data breach. And we can show that with historical model data. And the models can be, the models are extremely sophisticated, but at the end of the day, it's very easy to understand that cybersecurity is about a state of mind. It's about waking up every day and saying, I need to think about doing these basic things that are going to happen. The heartbleeds, the drowns, they will be there will be 0 days that everybody's going to be affected by, but as an organization, your risk level is always determined by how you respond to those things. And how you respond to those things is about having processes, procedures, daily work cycles in place.
We always use the analogy of like household chores, like how do you prevent disease spreading from a public health point of view? It's not about like wearing hazmat suits around. It's not about taking emergency, the little fizzy stuff that has no medical science to it. It's about washing your hands. It's boring. You have to continually do it every time you cough or you sneeze or you go to the bathroom, but it's what's actually is effective. And like if you take a public health approach to security of just doing those basics of like strong authentication, keeping your devices up to date, goes a long way. And getting back to the government side of things, like Eric Schmidt from Google was an advisor to Obama, and Obama said, what can the U.S. be doing to improve cybersecurity posture? And Eric Schmidt said, strong authentication, keep your devices up to date, and use encryption. Those three things. and you see the White House CNAP, the Cybersecurity National Action Plan that was released, covers those. There's 3 pillars. One is strong authentication. One is modernizing IT infrastructure and devices. The third, they didn't do encryption. They funded Einstein, which is this horrible program. But 2 out of 3 is pretty good.
I will say just real quick, I mean, I think I actually am agreeing with you guys. Like,
You're not allowed to.
Yeah, well, I think the visibility, I mean, my example was a little flashy and fun, but I think that, like, having a tool that provides that visibility is part of having that routine, right? Being able to come in and see what's actually happening is, for these complex environments, that is table stakes. So I think we're agreeing.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think one of the things Arbor is kind of built on is you can't secure what you can't see. And so, you know, a lot of what we're trying to do is provide that visibility as well. We really look at helping organizations protect against 2 things. The first is availability threats, so people trying to keep legitimate users from using whatever the service is. Is it your online banking? Is it, you know, whatever you're providing? And DDoS has become, you know, pretty pervasive and pretty easy to perpetrate on people, and it's really, really easy to take people offline. And so, you know, we provide tools that help operators and enterprises stay available. The second is advanced threat, and a couple of you guys have mentioned this. You know, people are trying to get into your networks. They're trying to get your data. You know, which data matters? I don't know. It's whatever's important to you. And so in that case, I think it's really recognizing that the opponent is organized, they're funded, they're staffed, and they're really smart, and they probably know, you know, potentially more about your network than you do. And so it's really about kind of providing those visibility tools that allow you as the defender to be more effective and better at keeping those guys out.
Thanks. Okay. So changing tack once again, that's going to be a common theme here on the panel. Give us your perspective on being in Ann Arbor. What do you see as the advantages to your company, and what are the disadvantages of being in Ann Arbor?
You know, the advantages to us being in Ann Arbor, you know, the Ann Arbor tech community and University of Michigan is a great advantage for collaboration in a lot of our research projects. We collaborate with Michigan Cyber Range, so having that group here is great. And also as a pool we can draw employees from. We've been talking earlier, right? You know, I think the biggest challenge right now for us is finding those high quality employees to bring into the company. And I think being in Ann Arbor compared to a lot of other places is a pretty good situation. So that's, and it's a nice town to attract people to. But there are flip sides to that too, right? It's not Silicon Valley, right? You know, there's this sense that, you know, every good software engineer in the world should move to Silicon Valley because that's where it's really happening. And we're fighting against that a little bit and trying to both attract people to Ann Arbor and find good people in Ann Arbor. I think that's, you know, I believe that's a perception thing. And I know that there are a lot of, you know, startups and VC companies that are starting to recognize that, you know, there's a lot of good talent, a lot of good ideas, and a lot of, you know, much cheaper office space and stuff outside of the Valley, and the Midwest is a big area that they're focusing on. So hopefully that will start to turn itself around, I think. So, you know, collaboration, the talent pool, that's all great for Ann Arbor. You know, there are some advantages, right? You know, we don't have, you know, hurricanes and earthquakes, so we can do like disaster recovery in a little bit more of a local sense. But, you know, on the downside, we are kind of fighting that uphill battle about, you know, perception as kind of a tech company that's not, you know, where people expect tech companies to be, which is just, you know, something we have to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mike. The university is a huge asset, and does kind of lend a lot of credence to, like, just, you know, showing the depth of the talent pool here in this area, and Southeastern Michigan in general too has a very strong, deep technical roots. But I think one of the things that, from my perspective, is that, you know, you may get a lot of good talent coming out of the university, but at some point, sometimes, you know, they will leave. And the sort of more senior technical talent that is in the area, they tend to be more entrenched in their current positions, right? So we don't see enough of cross-pollination between companies, because that's a really healthy thing, right? People come in, they're fresh blood, they are excited to tackle new problems, and they're bringing all their own experiences to bear on something that they haven't worked on before, which I think is an extremely good thing. So, you know, the short answer is that Ann Arbor's fantastic, because there's obviously a lot of like just awesome aspects of the area, both in terms of the talent and the environment itself. But we aren't really quite fully bootstrapped in terms of the startup culture. We've got people staying and building careers here and moving around between companies.
Yeah, I think I won't repeat the aspects around the university. There's lots of positives there. You know, we hired close to, you know, most of the first 200 employees at Duo in Michigan, which I think in itself is a challenge. It's good that we were able to do that. We would have loved to build the rest of the company in Ann Arbor as well, but it's not feasible. We had to dip into other talent pools due to a lot of the reasons that Naeem mentioned. You know, the university is great for junior talent, but if you're looking for senior talent, you're looking for executive talent, it's very difficult. And Duo is a B2B SaaS, you know, technical security company, and if you think about like the Ann Arbor area, the Michigan, the Midwest, there's not a lot of other companies that fit that profile. So if you're looking for people that have experience in companies like that, they're not in the area. They're just inherently not here. There's no other pools to pull them from. So we have to fish in other ponds. On the other hand, we've adapted our hiring strategy and our people strategy to orient towards and to lean towards hiring for aptitude versus experience. Identify people that are fast learners that can grow really quickly as the company grows and our needs change, versus finding people that have done it before. And that's really important in our company and our industry, because there's a lot of really crappy security companies out there, as you guys likely know. And we want to build a different security company, which means we need different DNA in our organization. That's not only leadership, but individual contributors and manager level. We need people that aren't necessarily steeped in the security industry to build a different security company. So we celebrate that diversity of our employees, of their backgrounds, of their experiences, and hope that, you know, together we build a better company together. The other thing I'd say is as an ecosystem of tech companies, we're not fighting over the talent that's here locally. You know, we're all trying to bring more talent into the state. You have heard the quote that a rising tide lifts all boats. That's absolutely true when it comes to the Ann Arbor and Michigan tech scene. And it's true from the candidate point of view too, because they're coming to join a startup, they're taking a big risk, and they want to know that if things don't work out at Duo, things don't work out at Deep Field, Quad, that there's other companies where they can apply their skills. If they're picking up their family, they're picking up their career, and they're moving here, they need to know that there's a system and an ecosystem that they can stay here for a long time and not have to, you know, move back to one of the coasts.
So yeah, in terms of hiring and recruiting in Ann Arbor, it's a blessing and it's a curse, right? The fantastic benefits that we can talk to people about, such as the lack of traffic on the roads, a very, very beautiful city, and a very, very vibrant community in this area. Those are great attractors, and those work very well when we're trying to retain talent and convince people to come here. The recruiting on campus, the student recruiting, and I've been here and doing this for 15 years now. I've seen how it's gotten progressively harder and harder to recruit talent, and how valuable that talent is nationally. It used to be that if you wanted to bring on summer interns starting in June, you could plan on getting an offer out to them in May, maybe April if you were really quick. Now, and about maybe even 5 years ago, that had moved up. Now you need to get offers out in February. End of February, you were probably not going to get your offers in on time. And now it's up to like November, and this is over the past 2 years. We were recently at a career fair. Lots of great people. We wanted to bring someone in. By the time 2 weeks later, we sent them a invitation saying, hey, why don't we come talk? You know, we think our interests align. We got a note back saying, no, I already have an offer and I've accepted. And that is how quickly the talent pool in this town disappears. And that's how it's gotten to be extremely challenging to grow to large scales like Duo has done.
would just echo what everyone else said is, you know, obviously this is a great place to live and work, and I think people that are here know that. It's a little bit tougher with students to convince them to stay, and we recruit both here and pretty heavily at Michigan Tech. And what we find is, you know, we bring in interns in the summer, and we also bring in full-timers when they graduate. And it's almost a little bit easier if we find Michigan local people that have family connections and other ties here that will help them decide to stay versus somebody that came to Michigan from New York City and wants to, you know, move away when they're done. You know, the other thing I would say though is, you know, echoing what these guys have said about building the ecosystem, we have to continue to grow the, you know, the sort of the entire talent pool so that, you know, when somebody comes here, they know that if it doesn't work out with this company, they can go somewhere else, and there's a backup, and we can recruit, you know, spouses of people that are joining the university or other things like that. So I think those things are all things that we can do to make this more vibrant and more compelling.
I think one example, I won't use names, but we had a early employee at Duo who was extremely successful, grew through the organization, ended up leaving a couple years ago, went to another startup in the area to run their product organization. You know, grown a ton in his career, recently spun out his own consultancy, going to start a new company, and also brought back a previous CEO that he had worked with at a security company in the past to Ann Arbor, relocated their family. So those are the kind of stories that we want to see where each of our companies respectively, we can have employees, they can be successful, they can advance their career, but they can go out and start their own companies, go on to drive new initiatives at other companies in the area, and that cross-pollination will, again, make everyone else successful.
And I think, you know, since it is a small community and we do know each other, you know, quite a bit, there is a significant amount of sharing that happens. So if we come across a candidate that is not a good fit for us, but we know that they would be great in this other location, we're happy to say, you know, not a fit for us, but you know what, the kinds of things that you are interested in and that you want to do, you'd be a great fit to go over there, and we absolutely feel very comfortable sending them on because we know these they'll do well.
We're doing, I'm trying to find the exact event details, but we're doing a A2 Tech Homecoming where we're trying to bring in people from outside the state that might be in town due to, you know, the university homecoming, but get them to meet all of the companies in the area that are hiring, trying to find talent, and looking for people that have connections here, whether it's school or family, and are interested in coming back at some point in their lives.
Yeah, Manish, we were talking last night about the company that bought your company, why they want to keep you in Ann Arbor. If you want to explain a little bit about.
Yep, absolutely. And this was actually a discussion point during our conversations with them as well, as it wasn't, I mean, to a large extent, it was, you know, the people, the company, the assets. But one of the important discussion points was the importance of Ann Arbor as a recruiting hub to get to the talent coming out of the University of Michigan. The School of Information has fantastic programs that are developing machine learning talent, which is key for them. The computer science department, of course, has fantastic programs that are of great interest. So the design skills, the machine learning talent, the programming skills, software development skills, it was absolutely important for them to get a toehold into Ann Arbor, and it was a factor.
Thanks. So, changing tacks yet again. What I'd like you to do is, just based on your experience, think about and tell us about what you see as the future in terms of security. So, Manish was the one who said, yep, I think we're at the nadir and it's only going to go up from here. Maybe not all of us are as optimistic, but give us your perspective. What do you see is the future? Mike?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a twist on this, which is we're trying to figure out and have been trying to figure out, you know, what the potential role for us is in the security world, right? You know, we until a couple years ago weren't really doing much security. We do a lot of research on cognitive-based artificial intelligence, machine learning, all autonomy, all that kind of stuff. So what's the role for us here? So we've been looking at this, and I think, you know, we're hoping that the areas we've identified are going to be an aspect of the future of security. So one is training, right? You look at what the Defense Department says they need in terms of what they call cyber defenders or cyber operators, and there's a huge staffing and training problem there. And so one of the challenges they're facing is that in order to train a cyber defender, you need someone out there to be the threat that they can practice against. And so one of the areas we're identifying is, instead of having people be that threat, can we build AI systems to be that threat? And you can practice against, like you play a video game against the AI in the video game, can you practice cyber defense against a AI opponent, in a sense? So that's one area. A second area that we're looking at is kind of more forward-looking, and I agree that the basics of security are where the attention should be right now, but we're looking a little bit ahead to what we call cyberspace defensive operations, and this is again coming from the Defense Department. So if you think about in a military base, like a forward operating base, there's some basic security stuff they do, right? They build a wall, they have people standing guard, they put up a bunch of barbed wire. That's all the sort of basic security stuff. But then they do what they call defensive operations, which is gathering intel on the threats that might come in, anticipating when an attack and who might be attacking, what tactics they might use, and going out and kind of preempting that threat proactively, even if it's just patrolling through an area for a show of force to, disrupt a meeting or something. So we're looking at that on the cyber side as well. Can we help facilitate these cyberspace operations where you're recognizing a potential threat, someone has attacked companies like yours, targeting certain kinds of data that you have, using certain methods, and you might be next on the list. You should, take some steps, change your security posture, do something in order to kind of proactively be prepared for this threat. So that's the second area we're looking at. And then the third, what flips it around a little bit, is what are the security aspects of autonomy? Which is, someone, I guess, in the previous panel mentioned that a self-driving car is also a self-stealing car, which I think is a great point, right? And if you're going to be in just, a car that is driving itself, right, you're going to care a lot about the security of that car, and that no one is able to get in there and take control of aspects of it. And there have been some pretty eye-opening demonstrations of how vulnerable some of these systems are. Once you put autonomy in the mix, the system is doing more, the human is doing less, and so when the system is doing more, breaches in security can be disruptive in new ways that they weren't when the system was less autonomous. So those are some things we're thinking about from a future of security perspective.
So I look forward to John disagreeing with me, by the way. I think that one of the interesting things about my perspective is that I have a lot of sort of respect and appreciation for all the amazing advances that machine learning and sort of AI is hip again that can bring. But at the same time, I think a lot of it, what I see at least, is that there isn't necessarily, there's no magic, right? A lot of times it's how much data can you bring to bear, how much context can you bring to bear on a specific problem or a specific use case. And I think that the genie's sort of out of the bottle when it comes to big data. Like, this is the nature of like the world we live in today, right? Everybody is trying to, even if they don't know what it is trying to figure out how to apply it to, their business. And we're seeing that some sectors are being a lot more successful than others. But I think that financial institutions, for example, are probably one of the most leading examples of like how to use data proactively to advance their sort of mission, right? And I think that as the tool sets mature and the product capabilities in the market mature, you're going to see that sort of go down market and go all the way from like the biggest enterprises of financial institutions to universities or small mid-level enterprise. So I think that's a big part of it. Beyond that, I think that there's just a cyclical nature to the security industry. I feel like every time a new generation of engineers comes up, they sort of rediscover sort of some of the same problems. We do a lot of device classification in sort of some of our work, right? We try to identify devices on the network. And so at one point we had gotten a bunch of like Wi-Fi enabled scales and blood pressure monitors. And it blew my mind when I was doing packet capture on these things and I saw that they were sending all their data in the clear up to the cloud. You know, like this is like HIPAA protected information that's just like going out into the void. So, you know, and this isn't like from some, you know, little tiny startup. This was like a big device manufacturer. So I think you're going to kind of see lots of incremental improvements. I don't know if there's ever going to be a revolutionary thing that fixes security. I certainly don't think we're going to see it in the next 5 years. But I think that you're going to kind of see, again, this sort of incremental improvement as more tools and mature and people become hopefully more aware.
I think I can disagree with that. I think, and this is where Peter stands up and says, young whippersnappers, you know, when you're talking about, you know, I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see a dramatic reduction in the number of breaches that are happening at organizations. Breaches that are happening, not breaches that are being discovered. You know, the breaches that we discover today are the ones that happened 3 years ago. So breaches that are happening now, we'll still discover them for some time to come, but the actual breaches happening will reduce. And I say that because if you look at some proof points in security over the last few decades, you know, we used to be unable to use a shared medium for communications. We had insecure networks, and so we bolted on like firewalls, IDSs, IPSs. Nowadays, in the audience, you guys can all get on this shared conference Wi-Fi. It might not even have a, you know, a WPA password, but you trust in TLS. You can do online banking. We can build secure channels over insecure transports, insecure physical mediums. Similarly, you used to plug in a Windows XP machine on the internet and it would be compromised. I think the average was within like 6 seconds or something, you know, if it was just on the internet by these flash worms that would exploit remote vulnerabilities. Nowadays, it costs $1 million to break into an iPhone. That's the public price for a remote iPhone exploit. That's really good. We've made some really big advances in hardening the security of our devices, in improving our authentication methods. We still see, you know, absolutely silly phishing attempts like, you know, Colin Powell's email. But if he had deployed Google's security key, which is a protocol called U2F, he would have been unphishable with a hardware-backed credential. The technology exists in the current day, and some people are deploying it, but it certainly hasn't reached the mass market. And I think it'll take a few technology cycles for that to trickle into mainstream organizations. But I am very optimistic on where security is going in the future. I think that some of the fundamental use cases I was speaking to, I think we'll solve that kind of 80% of the current security problem for 80% of the organizations out there. There will always be, you know, the government use cases, the high value targets that adversaries can afford to go after, but it will no longer be economically rational to go after, say, a mid-market company that only has, you know, a few million dollars in assets.
Absolutely. And I think one of the key challenges that you identify there, John, is the fact that this technology, all of these developments that have helped, that have moved the needle forward on cybersecurity, there's a deployment and an adoption issue with them. And that's part of the reason that why I'm hopeful on the future of cybersecurity is because back in the 90s, right, still in school, we would look at the state of how insecure everything was around us and how fragile the internet was, and we'd shake our heads and say, how does this ever work? How is it ever going to get better? Because the incentives are misaligned. If you want to do things better from a cybersecurity perspective, you spend money. You spend money, and at the end of the day, you still don't have any concrete way of showing that you made things better. But things have changed. Things have changed because of the insurance industry. So cyber insurance industry has stepped in to make the money flows align with the incentives. It actually provides a reason finally for people to invest in better security adoption, as well as better security policies and strategies. Now all of a sudden, when a CISO goes out and deploys a fancy FireEye solution or the best IPS protection system, they can come back a year later and show that their insurance rates went down because the scoring system that the insurance company was using demonstrated that their security posture had improved. So all of a sudden, now the $1 million investment resulted in a lower premium, and they actually got benefit for doing better security practices. And that's one of the main reasons that I'm hopeful. When the economics align, problems get solved.
I think a lot of that, a lot of sort of the worry that I have about where things are going is more around, sort of the autonomous vehicles, the Internet of Things, a lot more of these devices coming out that nobody's ever going to patch, and hopefully we can develop them in a way that they'll automatically patch or be better. But our reliance on the network is so much more strong than it ever was. I think a lot of people have a panic attack if their iPhone stops working, right? So, and it's almost to the point where we can't go back and operate without it because we don't have any of the capabilities we used to have. And it's not like going back to 1980. Who knows how to get a fax now? I mean, nobody. So it's really imperative on us to continue, like John said, to lock these things down and evolve these technologies and get them pervasive so that it is secure and there is no financial real benefit to going after people.
The optimism of youth. Being much older, I'm a little more down on what our prospects are. I saw the other day that C and C++ are still in the top 5 languages being used. And 20 years ago when I got into this, I was like, well, yeah, when we stop using C, that's going to just clean up this whole mess of problems.
We'll all be using memory-safe languages.
Yeah, strongly typed languages, it's not a new idea. Anyway, so one last question, formal question for the panel. So what do you see for the future of Michigan and Ann Arbor in terms of the security and tech industry here?
So 2 things. One I mentioned earlier. I hope that the dot-com tech Silicon Valley world expands beyond Silicon Valley, and you start seeing a lot more of that kind of activity, a lot of other places. I think that that world has got to start expanding. I mean, there's just so much physical space and physical office space, but eventually people are going to recognize that there are other places that they want to live, and not everyone can go to one spot. So, and I think Ann Arbor with the university and all is poised to be a place that could be an early adopter in that trend. The second is I think there is going to be a revolution in transportation coming up, and I think that Southeast Michigan is one of a small list of areas where that revolution in transportation is going to take place, and I think there are a lot of opportunities, in the security world around that revolution in transportation that's going to take place partly in this area.
I'm hoping that as we talked about earlier, some of the challenges will be continue to be mitigated as the sort of scene continues to bootstrap up and we attract more talent to the area. I'm really hoping it sets up a virtuous cycle, both just within the business ecosystem as well as with the university. I think the university is playing a really important role with things like the Center for Entrepreneurship, SI, and events they host like MHACs and the A2 Data Dive that are conditioning people both in the region at large as well as the student population to be thinking about how they fit into this more nimble tech scene, right? And so I think that the university and the state have a lot to offer. As I said, at the beginning, I think there's a lot of deep tech roots here, and my hope is that as sort of some of the more entrenched tech talent sort of becomes aware of it, you'll see more people moving around, you'll see more proliferation of ideas and more innovation.
Yeah, I think to be successful as an ecosystem, particularly in Ann Arbor, you need entrepreneurs, which I think we have a good source of at the university. We need new ideas, and we need money in order to fund and sustain them. We need talent for them to build companies, and we need mentors and advisors to allow them to scale and grow. And we don't check the box in all of those places. There's lots of gaps. But what I've seen work successfully in the past, anyone familiar with ISS? Peter is? What's ISS, Peter? Yep, company in Atlanta, Internet Security Services or Systems. Yeah, Chris Klaus built the first vulnerability assessment product ever. It was one of the first big security companies, and They ended up IPOing. They ended up getting then bought by IBM for $7 billion. And that became a catalyst for that Atlanta ecosystem. They had the talent, they had Georgia Tech, they had the money that had flowed into the area through that big sort of catalyst through that acquisition. And the number of security startups that have come out of the Atlanta region is just astounding. And it's all of the ex-ISS folks starting new companies, building new products, bringing in more and more talent. And it is that cycle, but you need something to kick that off. So I hope that there's a catalyst amongst all of the companies that are building right now, that one of us or multiple of us will have a big exit that can allow Ann Arbor to do what Atlanta did about a couple decades ago.
Absolutely, and I think the conversation is starting to change. So when we're out there talking to VCs or other people, the conversation very quickly tends to go towards, oh, by the way, do you know this other company that's also in Ann Arbor? Oh, Ann Arbor, I recognize Ann Arbor. I know of Ann Arbor, so it starts off as that, and then in a lot of cases it transitions into, I'm also on the board of this other organization in the region. And then all of a sudden, it's a known factor. It's something people are familiar with. It's something that people are starting to get comfortable with. And that is a huge, huge benefit because at the end of the day, people getting comfortable with non-Silicon Valley startups is going to be the key for Ann Arbor to be successful.
I think people are definitely recognizing Silicon Valley is not the only place to be. Austin, Texas has a sort of a huge tech scene, Atlanta, and people are trying to get out of there. I mean, they want to move to somewhere you could actually buy a house and have a life. And so, I think, it's really on us in the region. And like John said, what is the catalyst? But I think we can all work together to really build this and make this potentially the next Austin.
Thank you. Now, so some really interesting comments and perspectives on a lot of different topics. So we're going to open it up for questions from the audience now. And if there isn't some fruit for some interesting questions, then maybe it's too cold in here. We put you all to sleep. We've got one.
So I promise I'm not a shill for Duo, but John's probably going to like this question. There was a recent article, an article in the Times this morning basically saying that it appears the break-in at the DNC and the Hilton campaign was caused by a spear phishing attack putting up a fake login page. So many of these things would be trivially solved by two-factor auth. Why is the adoption of that been so hard? I mean, from my perspective, and sort of what can be done, especially in a sensitive organization like this, where you would think that trivial things that cost nothing or almost nothing would be obvious. Why the big resistance?
I think, anyone in the audience used to have an M token? Yeah, that's why it's hard. Not only is that technology difficult to use, difficult to manage, difficult to deploy, but it also kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Very bad connotation of two-factor in the past few decades. And it's surprising that, RSA Secure ID was actually developed in 1985. It's actually one of the first security products that ever existed. And it's still, in some ways, in the same form today. So, we think we have a better approach to it, leveraging mobile devices that everyone carries around. It's kind of lowering that bar of adoption where you don't have to only deploy it to your sensitive IT admins. You don't only have to employ it to, the 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 faculty and staff that access, M-Pathways, Wolverine Access. You can now deploy it to all faculty, staff, and students because they're all targets. When individual student university accounts are going for $20 a pop on the black market, they're definitely going to be a target. So it is trying to find the right innovations that we've had in technology applied to this problem. How do we take that advanced technology but democratize it and make it easy and effective for all users, all populations, all organizations. What I would say is there's still more to come there. You know, I'm not the kind of person that says like, hey, you know, passwords are dead, we should all be getting rid of them. That will happen naturally over the next 3 to 5 years. We'll have stronger credentials that are built into our consumer mobile devices. They'll be built in by Apple. They'll be built in by Google, maybe by Microsoft. And at the point where we have a hardened but usable credential that just comes embedded on every new phone that's sold through, you know, any outlet, then we can start to make a big dent in the problem. But until that point, when Colin Powell is still not, you know, enabling two-factor when it's available, we're still going to see these breaches occur.
So, quick question: how many people are using Duo right now in the audience? All right. Does anybody think that it's hard?
Feature requests.
Yeah.
Feature requests.
So, but there are a lot of people in the university community who are resisting that, and I think the lesson there is that we're all people, and people generally don't like change. And if you get comfortable with one way of doing things, there has to be some reason, there has to be some effort. So, of course, as we've rolled out Duo across the university, putting the technology in place was nothing compared to the communications and the change effort. So I think that this is, you know, to answer Randy's question, this is one of the things that we really have to put in with the security program, is we also have to change the attitudes of people, and people have to have an understanding that this is a real problem and their behavior is part of it, and we've got to change that to address the problem.
That's why I don't like the discussion of like nation state actors and like security being a battle of good versus evil, or us versus, you know, China and Russia. Like IT security exists to allow your users to adopt productive technologies while staying safe. That's it. Like, the user is your customer. You want to make their lives easier. You're not trying to battle China. And I think that's kind of a big change in the security culture of organizations that a lot of companies are coming around to, of like, how do I actually give my users good security controls, and how do I actually trust them and push security responsibility down to them? Like, give them a security authority. It sounds incredibly scary. Like, users are stupid. They type their passwords into random forms and they run random EXEs. But how do you make them part of your security program, as opposed to kind of a us versus them, you know, darn those stupid users, if it wasn't for them, we'd be 100% secure.
Hi. Could the panel touch a little bit on biometrics and security? I know we didn't really speak anything about that, and it seems to be one of the new things these days, is because like every phone has a fingerprint sensor, every mobile device, like, you know, you just scan and you're in. Even passports these days are all biometrics too, though. And there's some, you know, documentation out there about people even now going into stealing fingerprints which are being stowed or whatnot, and you know, you can't really replace those. You know, you can change your password, but can't do anything with that though. So, and plus, if you do manage to steal like biometrics, you could, you know, do identity fraud and whatnot too though. So, what do you guys think about that?
I think biometrics, they have a troubled history, similar to you know, strong authentication. You know, it used to be the USB card reader that you'd plug in, and you know, high false acceptance rates, and you know, terrible user experience. And you have the challenges of they're irrevocable. You lose your fingerprint, you can't change it like you can change your password. So there's some sort of fundamental challenges, but it's a similar theme in that, you know, now every modern mobile device has a fingerprint reader. Suddenly we've taken a technology that was too difficult to deploy, too difficult to manage in the past, had these kind of security concerns, and now it's everywhere. And that's really powerful. Can you leverage that? Can you bring that into your organization to add a additional guarantee that it truly is that end user who's logging into whatever system? So extremely powerful capabilities when these things just come for free, and they actually have kind of enabling use cases for the user as well. It's not just for the organization's security, but the fact that I can unlock my phone with a fingerprint, it might not be stronger than a PIN, it actually has been shown, to have a higher false acceptance rate than like a 5-digit PIN. But people are more likely to enable it because it's easier. And that's what's important.
Can you say something about venture capital in Tree City? Is it harder or easier to access venture capital, and how's that affected the growth rate of your company?
I could start from my experience. So, when Deep Field was getting started, I remember, so I wasn't personally there, but I remember, Craig and Joe talking about going to, Battery and some of these other, Sand Hill Road VCs, and so some of them, just didn't buy the premise. Hot jokes on them now. The other ones that did, the next question was, great, when are you going to move to the Valley? And they were like, well, that's not really the plan. And they were like, cool, well, we'll see you later. So that was tough at the start. But I think these days it's starting to shift. I know that, so DFJ had their Mercury division, which they've now spun off into a separate fund called Mercury Fund. It's based in Austin, and they're focused entirely on sort of middle of the country, flyover states kind of investing. So they're putting a lot of investing into, Chicago, Columbus, Ann Arbor, places like that. And I think even now when people are seeing right, there's talent pools, there's ideas, there's, people at different stages of their lives want to build a life, maybe not in the Valley. That's making it so that now these East and West Coast funds are actually starting to take second look in some cases. And so I think that is starting to shift. And I think Manish talked a little bit about that, so I don't know if you want to share your perspective too.
No, absolutely. And it is getting much easier because there is the existence and the formation of funds that are focusing on the Midwest region. There's the groups out of Chicago Venture Funds. There's Drive Capital, which is also very active in this area. So there's absolutely a growing awareness for a large number of capital providers to have a presence in the Midwest. And so I think it is improving dramatically.
Yeah, and you can't be understated that some of these are new funds, new money, specifically designed to funnel capital into this area, which is nice because then, you're not fighting over necessarily the same dollars. It's sort of like you want to bring your best idea, obviously, but it gives you more of a cushion to kind of get going.
If I could ask a question on this, I don't have a huge basis of comparison, but we have been talking to some of these locally oriented funds, and based on what I've heard about how this works other places and how it works here, it seems like it's much easier to get time and attention with the locally based funds than it is, Sand Hill Road. I understand as you go, you have your big meeting, and you're
it's exactly like
done,
the HBO
right?
show Silicon Valley.
Exactly, and
it's very accurate.
One of the places we're working with, we've been talking to them for 4 or 5 months now, right? And lots of meetings, lots of conversations. They're willing to hop in the car and drive over and chat with us, right? And so it seems like you can get more time, and for us, it's been hugely valuable from some of these local places. It's a little bit of a different culture, maybe. I don't know if that's true, but that's what it seems like to me based on my limited experience.
We had those early on challenges, doing the Sand Hill Road tour and getting term sheets back that we're saying, we would expect you to be out of there. Our first meeting ever was with you walk into the VC office, starts with the A, ends with Z, marble walls, Silicon Valley is spot on. And it really required us finding a investor with a little bit of a different thesis that had an interest in the area, and ended up coming to Ann Arbor. University was nice enough to let us host them there, and it just takes that first kind of suspension of disbelief for the investor to come into the area. Then they see the community, then they see the results, and every investor since has been pounding down our door, flying into Ann Arbor, just coming to our office and literally knocking on the door to get our attention. So once you have initial results that are attractive, then it becomes less about where you are location-wise.
And we absolutely had conversations which were along the lines of, we're going to be in Ann Arbor anyways, we'd love to stop by. And that's how things are changing now.
Yeah, and I guess, one last thought. not all sunshine and roses, though. I will say that like it almost feels like the barrier to hitting that sort of the next sort of levels of funding is almost higher, because we need to prove ourselves that much more, right, than a lot of places in the valley, and that's purely because the magnitude of capital on the coast is just so much higher. So hopefully, when you get some successes like with Duo and Quadmetrics and all the other participants here, we can kind of like continue to build up the volume of new funding coming to the area.
Thanks. Yep.
So back to building security companies. Oh, hey guys. In Ann Arbor. So we talked about great talent pool coming out of the University of Michigan. We just talked about funding and how folks are, how Ann Arbor is getting on the map. How would you help people coming out of that talent pool find the problem that they can work on? Things that could make great businesses, things that are viable, things that you think are solvable, that are that could make the world better, but that maybe hasn't been addressed yet.
So I think a lot of problems are already being very well identified in the hundreds of PhD theses that get generated every year. It's the big step forward is in understanding that those problems that are identified in those theses and the research work that happens on campus are actually real problems. And once people start to understand that those were not fictional DARPA made up problems, those were not fictitious NSF where they just came up, they threw 3 random words in a hat and pulled them out and said, let's have a program on this. Those problems are coming from somewhere real, right? Somewhere people sat down, had a conversation about what are the challenges that we need to address, where do we need to address, where do we need to put our investments? Mm-hmm. And so those problems are very much real and are probably the starting point of creating solutions after the technology has been proven in research.
Definitely the university. I mean, the PhD program, my experience of it, didn't really do work. And I don't mean that in a slacker way, but it was honestly more of a startup incubator than a research program. And I don't know if it was something different about my advisor Farnham or our research group, but like Craig and Rob went off to start Arbor Networks. They were Farnham students. The next generation was like Evan Cook, who was in the same research program, went off to start Twilio, which is just IPO'd, now $4 billion market cap. I told him it was a terrible idea. I'm like, dude, focus on the security stuff. It's way more important than telephony. He didn't listen to me, so that's good. We spun out Duo. Another friend who was in the program ended up building an Indian law search engine. So there was a lot of diversity of ideas some that were completely unrelated to our research, but it was that being in that environment where you could spend the time to figure out what are the real problems, and with our kind of collective knowledge, can we come up with unique solutions? So definitely the university is a great source, and there's a lot of programs, whether it's Empowered, MHACs, even the Raw School of Business kind of orienting a lot of their programs around entrepreneurship versus like maybe your stereotypical MBA of consulting or going into middle management. So it's good to see that change.
Good, thanks.
Well, I want to thank our panelists. These brought some really interesting and diverse perspectives into our talk here today. And I also want to thank them for the things that they're doing in Ann Arbor to make it a better community. They're working hard, taking a risk, bringing ideas in, keeping people in the area. From a personal aspect, Deepfield, my son stayed here in Ann Arbor after he graduated, which we appreciated. But they're doing some great things for the community. I think we've got a bright future ahead in the synergy between the university and what these people are doing for us. And hopefully you found this morning interesting. Joe will come up. We've got a great program this afternoon after lunch. But first, if we can give our panelists a round of applause.